Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed.
United States President Trump's Middle East peace envoy is full steam ahead, traveling all over the Middle East in hopes of restoring peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner is leading the team, and now, after today nearly being snubbed, Kushner's just met with Egyptian President al-Sisi as well as King Abdullah of Jordan. But today may be Kushner's biggest day of meetings. Right now he's meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in hopes of rebooting talks that have been completely stalled for years. But already this is looking to be an uphill battle. The Palestinians are very skeptical of this American negotiation, citing the State Department's unwillingness to endorse a two-state solution, as well as ongoing turmoil within Trump's own White House. President Abbas himself has also said it would be pointless to negotiate with Israel amidst ongoing police investigations against Netanyahu in various corruption scandals, because it would be a shame to make progress on peace talks only for the Israeli leadership to abruptly change. It doesn't seem like there will be any threat of that happening anytime soon, though, since the latest polls suggest that Netanyahu's Likud party has actually gained in popularity despite the accusations, potentially bringing his total number of spots in the Knesset to a commanding 34 seats, higher than any other party. Still, United States officials are saying that Washington can't commit to a two-state solution for fear that it would bias one side of the negotiations over the other. This is especially frustrating for Palestinians who have been complaining since the beginning of America's lack of overall clarity on the matter. They're clearly less than inspired by Team Trump's latest push, especially after a leaked tape of Jared Kushner made headlines in which Kushner himself told his interns that there, quote, may be no solution to the Israeli-Palestinian peace after all. Let's hope he's wrong about that. Prime Minister Netanyahu has just met in Russia with President Vladimir Putin, joined by his top security council to address the growing threat of Iran in Syria. This is a critical meeting that the Israeli envoy has been prepping for quite some time now, one which holds high stakes for Israeli security.
מחר אצא לפגישה עם נשיא רוסיה ולדימיר פוטין. הצטרפו אליי ראש המוסד וראש המטה לביטחון לאומי. אני אדון איתו על הניסיון המואץ של איראן להתבסס צבאית בסוריה. זה עדות כמובן לתוקפנות של איראן, שלא פחתה כהוא זה אחרי הסכם הגרעין, אבל זה גם מציב בעיה לא רק לישראל, אלא לכל מדינות המזרח התיכון ולעולם כולו.
Russia became a major player in the Syrian civil war when it entered the fray back in 2015 in support of President Assad, leading airstrikes and bombings against the Syrian rebels. This has often put Russia at odds with Israel because the IDF has been carrying out raids against Syrian weapons transfers for some years now. But the stakes are high for Israel to broker some kind of agreement with Russia as well, especially as Iranian presence in Syria has skyrocketed in the wake of the instability.
אדוני הנשיא, אנחנו מנצחים כולנו במאמץ בינלאומי אדיר את דאעש, וזה דבר מבורך מאוד. אבל מה שלא מבורך הוא שבמקומות שדאעש יוצא, איראן נכנסת. ואנחנו לא שוכחים לרגע שאיראן מוסיפה לאיים כל יום על השמדת ישראל. היא מחמשת ארגוני טרור, היא מחוללת טרור בעצמה.
Just last week, we revealed that Iran was nearly finished building a massive missile factory in Syria, potentially placing thousands of Iranian rockets within range of Israeli soil, which means Netanyahu has a lot at stake in the meeting with Putin. Now, the Arab world has been fiercely boycotting the nation of Qatar since June, demanding that Qatar cease ties with Iran. But now it looks like Qatar is prepared to oppose this intense regional pressure and is actually trying to completely restore Qatar-Iranian relations back to full health. Qatar is sending a clear message to the Gulf states that it plans to resist the blockade placed against its land, air, and sea routes.
طبعا الدول الأربع هي تتمنى أن تتحرك السلطات القطرية في اتخاذ الخطوات القانونية واتخاذ أيضا الأمور العملية لملاحقة طبعا الأفراد والكيانات المقيمة على قطر ومتابعتها لوقف تمويل الأنشطة الإرهابية الواردة طبعا في القائمتين السابقة والقائمة الأخيرة. طبعا هذا الأمر يؤكد مصداقية وجدية قطر، هذا ما تتمناه الدول الأربع، لكن قطر لم تتخذ أي تحرك بهذا الخصوص.
Diplomatic relations were downsized with Iran last year, limiting Qatar-Iranian cooperations down to a mostly oil ties. Regionally, Qatar and Iran share a large offshore reserve of natural gas, which requires clear lines of communication from both sides in order to work. After the crisis began in June with the Gulf states' blockade of Qatar, ties with Iran slowly began to warm up, practically in spite of the Arab nation's demands for them to cease. But now Qatar is clearly prepared to fly in the face of any such demands, announcing that full diplomatic ties will be restored, along with the reopening of its embassy in Iran's capital. There's a delicate balance at play here, with overlapping religious and political agendas, too. Saudi Arabia, for example, is at the head of the boycott, but just last week the Saudi government opened its border with Qatar to allow religious pilgrims to peacefully make their yearly Hajj pilgrimage. But by fully embracing relations with Iran, Qatar now seems to be deliberately stirring the pot, which could mean the crisis is only just unraveling. There's just been an extremely rare and potentially game-changing meeting between political rivals Turkey and Iran. This is a major development considering there hasn't been a meeting like this since 1979, meaning a new Middle East partnership may be forming faster than anyone expected. The General Chief of Staff of Iran's military has just visited the Turkish capital, meeting with top Turkish officials as well as President Erdogan himself. While Turkey and Iran have long found themselves wrestling for control over the Middle East, it seems that common mutual interests may finally be warming the two up, namely in their desire to see Israel fall.
They don't want emergence of a new regional order led by Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Israel, and Jordan.
As we've seen countless times, even in just the last few weeks, alliances are constantly shifting here in the Middle East. In the last month alone, we've seen several historic and rare peace talks, first between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and then when the King of Jordan made his first visit to the Palestinian Authority in 5 years to form a new crisis committee. But Turkey and Iran may also see the advantage of teaming up because of the Kurdish referendum for independence, which is scheduled to vote in September, a vote that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has already lended his support for. Both Turkey and Iran have a sizable Kurdish minority population, and if the Kurds were to get their own state, it would mean a major shift in land for both nations, and give Israel a new ally in the region, as well as a much-welcomed barrier against Iran. But as always, though the two countries may share a common interest, major differences will probably always stand in the way of true, lasting peace.
Turkey is still very much unhappy with what Iran do in the broader region, particularly from Yemen to Iraq to Syria. So it's very much compartmentalized relationship. It is, as American says, some kind of frenemy.
I guess that's why you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. All right, now there has been a surprising turn of events in the ongoing conflict in Syria, and now Egypt has just emerged as a new figure trying to de-escalate the crisis. With us is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. Brett, what exactly are we seeing over in Syria now?
Thanks, Aaron. Well, we've been following the latest tug-of-war in Syria with trying to set up the safe zones in the region. Now, back in May, Russia, Turkey, and Iran were consulting with the U.S. on setting up these ceasefire areas to help the Syrian people caught up in the war. And Israel's also involved in setting up safe zones along the southern Syrian border with Israel, while, of course, also trying to block Iran from gaining any foothold in the destabilized areas. But we've just learned that Egypt, and this is the first time ever, has now overseen the negotiations and signature of ceasefire deals between President Assad's army and the Syrian rebels. Now, that is huge because it means Egypt has officially been cleared by both the Saudis and Russia to enter into this conflict.
All right, now let me ask you this. If Egypt is now going to get their hands dirty in Syria, if you could say that, what does that mean for Israel?
Yeah, well, of course, Egypt is one of Israel's most important diplomatic allies, as well as a key partner in securing Israel's own borders. So obviously, Israel, of course, stands to benefit from having a friendly neighbor in the mix there, especially up against Iran, who Egypt certainly sees as a mutual threat to stability in the Middle East.
All right, wow. Well, let's go ahead and check out the report then.
Egypt has just emerged as a new and major player in the Syrian conflict, negotiating and signing key ceasefire deals between Syrian President Assad's army and the warring rebel forces. Loyalties in the region have been constantly tested over the last few years of the Syrian civil war, a crisis involving Russia, the U.S., Israel, Iran, Jordan, and Turkey. Egypt's relationship to Syria has been complicated over the years. Former President Mohamed Morsi cut all ties with Syria prior to 2013, relations which current President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has since been trying to fix. The Egyptian president has vocally supported Assad, even amidst reports of the Syrian president horrifically gassing his own people, because the fall of Assad could mean violent instability in the region. At least in that sense, Israel and Egypt have a lot in common. Israel faces a possible Iranian threat right on its own border if Iran continues to trickle into war-torn Syria. And with a new Iranian missile factory just months away from completion right inside Syria, this is a threat that seems more possible than ever. So Egypt's involvement here could be a critical ally for Israel, who understands the threat to Israel's security. But with even more interest in Syria than ever before, it's still very unclear when this conflict will ever be resolved or who will be left standing when it does.
All right, well, less than a day before President Trump's Middle East peace envoy was set to meet with President Sisi of Egypt, the United States announced that it was cutting almost $300 million of financial aid to Egypt. As one might expect, Egyptian officials were quite displeased by the news, and now it looks like they've canceled their meeting with Jared Kushner. Kushner is in Cairo right now and had planned on sitting with the Egyptian president to discuss reopening peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. Negotiations have been at a standstill since 2014, and this latest American envoy is the Trump administration's first real push for its new Middle East peace plan. But now things already appear to have hit a major snag. Citing Egypt's failure to address human rights violations, the United States is cutting $290 million of financial aid that was supposed to go to Egypt. This money is part of a 1979 peace treaty between Israel, Egypt, and the United States, which committed over $1 billion United States dollars to Egypt annually. President Sisi's sudden cancellation of today's Jared Kushner meeting shows just how severely this may impact Trump's peace mission. Peace between Israel and the Palestinians requires delicate negotiations with many Middle East nations, especially with Egypt, who holds a border with Gaza and has a peace treaty with Israel. Although Egypt has agreed to meet the rest of the Trump envoy at another scheduled meeting later in the day, Israel has reportedly asked the United States to reverse its decision to cut Egyptian aid. It's probably because rocking the boat in Egypt could rattle stability in one of the few places where Israel has a solid partner in security. Right after the meeting in Cairo, Kushner's envoy will land here in Israel and meet with Israeli and Palestinian leaders first thing tomorrow. Busting weapons smuggling rings is all in a day's work for Israel's border police, but this latest catch may be one of the most creative, or at least the smelliest. Inspectors just discovered a massive arsenal of weapons being smuggled into the West Bank in a garbage truck. In a joint coordination by Israel's border police and the Defense Ministry, police were able to identify the garbage truck leaving East Jerusalem, heading for the West Bank village of Idna. Hiding dozens of M16 automatic rifle parts, the truck's driver attempted to pass the vehicle through a military checkpoint in southern Jerusalem, but police sappers quickly flagged the truck and sent it directly to the border police. After arresting the driver and passenger, the police seized the weapons and sent the truck in for screening. It's still unclear exactly how many weapons were being transported in the truck, since the pieces were disassembled and hidden in the trash, but sources are already saying this is an unusually large shipment. Israeli security is always working around the clock to prevent weapons smuggling into the West Bank like this, even if they have to literally dig through the trash with their bare hands to do it. All right, now last month, President Trump pledged American support to help Lebanon fight the Islamic State. And now the Lebanese army, with help from the United States, is launching its biggest attack on ISIS to date. Here with us to explain the latest is ILTV's Brett Allen Smith. Brett, what's going on the ground there?
Thanks, Aaron. Well, Lebanon has been trying for years to clear out Islamic State fighters that seize control of a key area around Lebanon's border with Syria. That's, of course, just one front in a very complicated war. But we've just learned that the Lebanese army, backed with American training and support, is now trying to take back this region once and for all. And word has it that Lebanese soldiers received American military training for this, and that top officials from the Pentagon were actually there in Lebanon lending support for this operation.
All right, now since these ISIS troops are sort of straddling the border into Syria there, how is this going to affect all the other factions in the area?
Well, politics, of course, often makes very strange bedfellows. The Lebanese army is pushing against ISIS on one side of the border from the north, and then the Syrian army with Hezbollah are pushing against them, the same forces, on the other side from the south. Now, the U.S. has, of course, denounced Hezbollah as a terror group, so neither Lebanon or Hezbollah are going to claim there's any kind of coordinated effort going on here. But considering Hezbollah holds, of course, major positions in the Lebanese parliament, it could be very easy for both armies to be working in parallel, as you'll see right now in the report. Last month, President Trump hosted Lebanese Prime Minister Saad Hariri at the White House, pledging support to help Lebanon's army fight against the growing threat of the Islamic State. That would certainly seem to be the case now as the Lebanese army begins its most massive push to date to drive out Islamic State fighters holding critical zones along the Syrian-Lebanese border. Backed with Pentagon intelligence and American training, this is Lebanon's single biggest military option against ISIS, and it comes at a time when the Islamic State is reported to control nearly 300 square kilometers in the region, armed with a surplus of lethal and cutting-edge weaponry. The Lebanese army is now aiming to finally rid ISIS troops from the area once and for all. But they're not alone, because on the other side of the border, fighting the same ISIS troops, is the army of Hezbollah, backed by President Assad's Syrian army. Now, on paper, this would be a clear two-front coordinated attack, but both sides are denying any collaboration is going on. That's because Lebanon's closest ally, the United States, has of course denounced Hezbollah as a terror organization, with President Trump personally calling out Syrian President Assad too. But for those who see Hezbollah as one of Lebanon's biggest allies, as well as a critical member of the Lebanese government, this seems like a clearly coordinated military effort. With Israel involved only in the periphery so far, who knows what this war could bring to the Israeli front.
It looks like President Trump is doubling down on America's ongoing war in Afghanistan. After months of internal debate in the White House over issues of strategy, President Trump is now renewing United States involvement in the war and committing even more American boots on the ground in Afghanistan.
Micromanagement from Washington, D.C. does not win battles. They are won in the field, drawing upon the judgment and expertise of wartime commanders and frontline soldiers, acting in real time with real authority and with a clear mission to defeat the enemy. That's why we will also expand authority for American armed forces to target the terrorist and criminal networks that sow violence and chaos throughout Afghanistan. These killers need to know they have nowhere to hide, that no place is beyond the reach of American might and American arms.
Though Trump hasn't yet offered many details for the renewed military effort, officials are reporting that the president has just greenlit the defense secretary's request to deploy 4,000 additional troops to the war-torn region. It's clear that President Trump is planning to put additional pressure on Pakistan as well, a country he claims has sheltered extremists while also receiving billions of United States dollars annually. The Taliban has already lashed back at President Trump's announcement, with a Taliban spokesman saying, quote, "Instead of the continuing of war in Afghanistan, Americans should have thought about withdrawing their soldiers," end quote. But President Trump seems unwilling to back down, offering no timetable for pulling troops out of the region. On the contrary, it seems now that he's willing to fight for as long as it takes.
Our troops will fight to win. We will fight to win. From now on, victory will have a clear definition: attacking our enemies, obliterating ISIS, crushing al-Qaeda, preventing the Taliban from taking over Afghanistan, and stopping mass terror attacks against America.
Now, there are currently over 8,000 troops deployed in Afghanistan, which means that Trump's new strategy could add nearly 50% or more American troops to the fray. After a massive 5-day manhunt across Europe, Spanish police have finally cornered and shot dead the main suspect in Barcelona's horrific terror attack.
Poc abans de les 5 de la tarda, els Mossos d'Esquadra han abatut a Younes Abu Yaqub, el conductor de la furgoneta i autor material de l'atemptat de Barcelona, que dijous va provocar la mort de 14 persones.
The suspect was a 22-year-old Moroccan who grew up in the Catalonian community of Spain, where, to the outside world at least, he appeared to have integrated completely into Spanish society before being radicalized by a local Islamic terror cell. Even his neighbors and co-workers were shocked to learn that the young man they'd known for years, who had a comfortable factory job and a home, turned out to be behind the murder of 15 people in Barcelona, Spain. The suspect was spotted about an hour outside of Barcelona by a citizen who'd recognized his face.
Una trucada ciutadana que han avisat els Mossos i com es fa amb totes les trucades que hi ha i tots els avisos, s'ha anat a comprovar i efectivament era la persona més buscada d'aquests últims dies i els Mossos amb una gran actuació.
When police arrived at the scene, the suspect was wearing what appeared to be a belt of explosives, causing the police to open fire and ultimately kill him. The world is still reeling from the tragic events of the terror attack he committed, but for now, police seem satisfied to have neutralized the main suspect behind it all. So even with an American peace envoy in town, Palestinians don't seem too optimistic about securing an independent Palestinian state. But apparently Palestinian Authority President Abbas has a Hail Mary plan if things get really dire. He may dissolve the Palestinian Authority government completely and revert power back to the PLO. Clearly, the Palestinians are frustrated with stagnated efforts to create a Palestinian state. With the international community divided on the matter and negotiations with Israel at a standstill, Abbas's government is also split with Hamas over leadership of a potential state. But if he were to dissolve the Palestinian Authority, it wouldn't mean the end of the Palestinian leadership. Control of the area would fall into the PLO's hands, which Abbas himself is the head of. Under such a move, Israel would potentially become solely responsible for providing fundamental public services, including security, education, and health, leaving the PLO to pursue statehood in international forums. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard reports of a potential dissolving of the PA. There were similar frustrations with the peace process after failed negotiations in 2011 and 2014, and Abbas had threatened to dissolve the PA when those talks stalled, something that obviously never happened. These latest reports are coming just as Trump's peace envoy, led by Jared Kushner, has landed to meet both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas. President Trump has said if Jared Kushner can't broker Middle East peace, then no one can. So we'll just have to wait and see if that's really the case. All right, now the citizens of Gaza almost never get permission to see beyond their own borders, but 91 Palestinian children from Gaza just had the experience of a lifetime and were given their first glimpse ever of the city of Jerusalem. In a student exchange program overseen by the United Nations, 91 kids, all aged 14, were granted permission by Israel to leave Gaza for a 5-day summer camp program. For most of these children, who've been living in poverty-level conditions under militant Hamas's rule their entire lives, these are the first steps ever outside the Strip. And for all of them, it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see the ancient city of Jerusalem. The kids visited not only the Al-Aqsa Mosque, where they prayed at one of their holiest sites, but they also toured the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the place where Christians and Jews believe Jesus Christ was crucified and buried. The program director for the United Nations was there to see the kids' faces as they experienced a whole new world. Quote, "They were over the moon excited. There's really no other way to describe it," end quote. The kids will now continue to tour parts of the Palestinian Authority-controlled West Bank, including the capital of Ramallah. And while it's hard to argue with the look of sheer wonder on these children's faces, many are questioning why the United Nations program is only limited to Gaza-PA relations, and why the tour doesn't extend to introduce Gazans and Israelis as well. UNRWA, who organized the exchange, has frequently come under fire by Israel, accused of perpetuating anti-Semitism and anti-Israel teachings among Palestinian youths. We can only hope that one day soon, there will be more opportunities for the next generation to explore the other side, one that includes Israel as well. All right, now a young couple was vacationing in the Greek islands back this past July, and now while that's not news, what is that on the final day of their romantic trip, they thought it'd be nice to send a message in a bottle off to sea. Well, exactly 6 weeks later, their message ended up in one of the unlikeliest of places, in the net of a fisherman off the Gaza coast. For Jihad al-Sultan, it was certainly a surprising catch. The 54-year-old Gaza fisherman snagged the bottle just off the coast and found a letter scrolled inside it, along with some flowers. The message, written in English by Zach Mariner and Bethany Wright, reads, quote, "Hello, thank you for picking up this bottle. As a reward, here are some magic flowers. We are currently on holiday in Rhodes, and we would love to know how far this bottle got, even if it's just the next beach." End quote. I doubt they ever imagined their message would make it quite this far. After having a relative translate the message, al-Sultan was moved to discover such a message of peace reaching such troubled waters.
فأنا بتمنى كل صياد من قطاع غزة يزاول مهنة الصيد بحرية. كيف اجت هذه الزجاجة من اليونان بدون عوائق بحرية وبدون حواجز وبدون جيوش تمنعها، عدت كل الحدود هذه بدون أي مانع. احنا برضو كصيادين في قطاع غزة نمارس مهنة الصيد بحرية في مياهنا الإقليمية وفي المياه الدولية بحرية أسوأ بباقي شعوب العالم.
The fisherman has since reached out to the couple on email, telling them that their message was the best thing in his life and wishing them peace and happiness from Gaza. This for sure is one incredible way to make a new pen pal.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.